Hi there. Thanks for watching this episode of STEM Stories. We're a podcast that interviews women in STEM that have made the jump from academia into industry, and we're sharing unique stories and perspectives that aren't talked about enough. In this episode, we sat down with Dr. Brenna Traver, an associate professor and program coordinator of biology at Penn State's Lehigh Valley campus. In our conversation, Brenna dives into how she found mentorship in college, her advice to young women in STEM, and her own research with pollination and bees. But before we get into that, did you know that STEM Stories is a part of WISDOM, that stands for Women in Science Demonstrating Outstanding Merits? WISDOM is a nonprofit that works with STEM college females to connect them with opportunities in industry. And we're taking a moment today to ask you to join our mission. Whether you can contribute financially or just by following us on social media, it would make a difference in supporting our work. Or if you know of someone we should interview next, let us know. You can learn more by visiting our website, www.womenin.science, or follow us on Instagram at women_in_science. Now here's the episode.
Brenna, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you on our podcast series, STEM Stories by WISDOM. And you know about WISDOM already. Let me just still give a little bit an introduction. WISDOM is a nonprofit organization that we founded in 2017, stands for Women in Science Demonstrating Outstanding Merits. I think that's a great cause to help really increasing the gender equality in the STEM fields. The driver for me was that I was responsible globally, and I'm a scientist myself and have seen in other geographies in the world a different percentage of women in the STEM fields. In the US, there are different sources, but roughly 35% only, and we would like to help with increasing that. And we had various activities, and one of them is this series of podcasts to talk to role models, because we would like you to spread your story because it's exciting, it's inspiring for young women and in a university, and to see what are the options, what are the possibilities, and possibly also the challenges. So, Brenna, please give us a little bit introduction about yourself, who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're doing. I think it's exciting. I cannot even wait to hear more about this.
Thank you. First, let me say that I'm absolutely honored to be on this podcast. I think that the mission for WISDOM is something that personally aligns with my beliefs and goals, and to even be considered as someone that could be on something like this just really moved me, that you would even ask me to do this, because I don't tend to think of myself as necessarily a role model or an inspiration. I see it as I'm just doing my job. So thank you for having me. So I'm really pleased to be here today. So I guess a little bit about me. I grew up in Connecticut. And I think looking back at pictures, I liked science and nature a lot. I was a monarch butterfly for Christmas one year. I was a tree, or not Christmas, Halloween. I was a tree. So I think I clearly had an interest in the natural world. But I don't think it was until middle school that I really science became something fascinating to me. And it was when we must have been learning about fertilization, because it was just the concept of an egg and sperm coming together. And eventually that leads to what we are now. I did not understand all of the complications and the steps and the regulation involved at the time in middle school, but it was just something that's insane. These two cells come together and then we're here. And as I continued to age and learn more about it, it was just shocking to me that all of these steps have to go right. And at every one of these steps, many things can go wrong. So it felt like we were statistically beating the odds to become what we are today. So that really sort of set I really am interested in this. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but that was definitely a defining, I like science. I want to go into science. And that sort of set the stage. And Now, many years later, I'm in science as an educator, and that's just kind of how it's happened. And it's been a crazy ride, but I've enjoyed it a lot.
Wow. Let me let this sink in for various reasons. I think we could go on for hours, honestly, because um, yeah, you will tell us a little bit more about your work because you have been working scientifically with pollinators. So, and that's an interesting topic in itself, which definitely deserves a lot to talk about. And when you were talking about that, you are fascinated by a sperm and an egg really fusing to form the zygote, and from then on, really a body. Um, when you were talking of working with pollinators, I think mainly with honeybees, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
Um, you could say that this is also the same concept of bringing together male and female um, cells to propagate into the future, but with the help of a third party. So I think it's kind of IVF by nature.
Mhm.
So, and the funny thing is, or the unbelievable thing is that this is really across various kingdoms. So you have plant kingdom on the one hand, which developed very much earlier than animals, and then you have insects on the other side who help with that process. And this evolution and co-evolution, I think it's mind-boggling. And when you said that you were showing up at Halloween as a tree and a monarch butterfly, you already as a kid obviously had this pollination idea in the back of your mind without even probably knowing at the time. But that was the best I ever heard. That you had been a tree and a monarch butterfly. That is unbelievable. And really, yeah, the pollinator story in itself is very interesting. We recently had a wisdom event where a student was presenting about pollinators as well. And I think we put her already in touch with you. And I find it fascinating because usually you don't hear a lot of pollinators, and here we are, and just within a few weeks, twice. And when I dug a little bit more into this, I saw the magnitude of importance of this for our food chain, for everything. And I think you specifically were working on a topic that honeybees are infected, unfortunately, by a disease. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I had never really thought about my interest in science like tying into the whole pollination thing, that they're intimately tied, but I'd never put that together until you said that. I'd never even seen a similarity, but that's I find that really interesting and fascinating that I never saw that. Yeah, so I work with honeybees, and honeybees, it is not uncommon for them to be infected with multiple pathogens. So, infectious disease and agents that cause multiple diseases. That is very common for them. And the one that I specialized in through graduate school and then post-grad studies was Nosema cerami. So that's a fungal infection that causes a variety of negative impacts on honeybee colonies. And it on its own, it doesn't seem to be like a leading cause of increased colony losses. But
Hmm.
how I like to describe it, it's sort of, and I forget who coined this, but it's sort of the four Ps. You have pathogens, pesticides, poor nutrition, and parasites. So I think it's sort of nosema comes in, it's an infection that impacts the immune system, that impacts foraging, that impacts their eating behaviors, their socialization, and then it comes in and weakens it, and it sort of creates the perfect storm that's sort of sitting there ready for another pick your issue, be it a pesticide, be it a varroa mite coming in that just really ultimately weakens the honeybees. So I describe that to my students. This is the perfect time of year of we just had Thanksgiving break. They need to come back, rally for 2 weeks of classes and a week of finals. You're stressed. You're not sleeping well. You're not working out as much. You're not eating well. You're busy, and then you get that little cold that normally your body would fight off, but because of all of these other outside pressures, now that little cold just knocks you down. It becomes this, 2 week long battle to get rid of that little cough. So that's how I describe it to my students. It is definitely a stress disease.
Interesting, very interesting. And did you then research what can be done against this, certain therapies or?
Yeah, we did a
Fungicides.
little.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a little bit. We didn't look at testing any compounds against them, against Nosema, but we did look at a more cultural approach of could pollen feeding, supplementing with additional protein, could that help with alleviating losses related to nosema, or at least to nosema infections in the colonies. And what we found was that while it wasn't statistically significant in terms of mortality, that it was the same whether they received a pollen patty or not, if you have, 10 colonies and if four of them die, but you could save three of them, that could be very statistically significant to a beekeeper. So
Yeah.
biologically, it might not be significant, but to someone paying that money, it might be. If a pollen patty is a whole lot cheaper to just slap on the colony, let them feed from that. It's beneficial. If they don't want it, they won't take it down. That could be helpful. So again, it's a beekeeper choice of every beekeeper manages colonies in very, very different ways. There's this old saying, if you ask 10 beekeepers how you manage your colonies, you'll get 11 responses back because it's just there's such a wide variety of beliefs and practices and reasons for why behind that. So it's, you put out the information and you let the beekeepers assess which is going to work best for them.
That's really exciting. And I think just talking about this science, you are working with these little insects and you are working with these even smaller fungi. And and then you think about the impact these have. So when you're talking about the beekeepers, so there's industry behind that. I think it probably is responsible for billions of dollars of losses, possibly if these bees would die or more of them would die, which we unfortunately see, because all the fruit and vegetable industry would be extremely negatively impacted. So when some people think, oh yeah, they are doing this basic research, what is it good for? I think these impacts are enormous and one has to be aware of that. Funny side note, only for me at least, I did my PhD with a fungus as well. That was a very different spore-forming fungus, which showed aging symptoms. And so I did aging research on this fungus model organism. So fungi are, I think, heavily underrated. They're very, very important to eat up microplastics or whatever you name it. But that's a different topic. We shouldn't talk too much about this. We could, as I said, go on for hours because I think this pollination evolution topic also is extremely exciting and also has even philosophical um, aspects to it. But you already said where your love for STEM really came from. You have been exposed in your childhood to topics that really interested you. And then you decided to go into this direction to study. And today being a professor for the STEM field in biology. Have you felt any challenges being a woman in this field?
Yes, and I want to start by saying I think I'm incredibly fortunate that during growing up, I grew up sort of after the women in STEM movement have sort of become more solidified and more accepted. So
Okay.
I was very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities. There was a lot of support. There were a lot of programs for me to get involved with. So I was incredibly lucky for the time that I grew up in to have those opportunities and to have parents that encouraged that and supported that and cultivated that in me. My mentors, my graduate advisors, also very, very supportive as well. But being in a male-dominated field can absolutely be difficult. While we like to think that we've come a long way in how people view women in society, there are still many that view it as you have a traditional role, and that's great that you got an education and you got a job, but at some point, aren't you going to fulfill and become a wife and raise children at home? There is a lot of societal pressure
Yeah.
to fulfill that specific role. And for women, I don't have children, but for women that do that, I give them a lot of credit to balance work and
Yeah.
raising a family. So there is a lot of pressure I felt to prove myself. And I'm naturally a competitive person, so I can rise to that. But it is tough and it is difficult. And I know not
Hmm.
everyone has that personality to be able to let those comments or those beliefs roll off them and move harder. But there is definitely a sense of needing to work harder to prove yourself to get where you are.
You mentioned your mentors. So you did have mentors because we as Wisdom want to provide mentorship because I think that's really crucial to take a decision in which way to go. So I think you have been extremely fortunate because I think most people don't have a mentor. I personally did not have a mentor as well when I moved then finally from research into industry. That was for me going into the unknown. I didn't have a mentor, and therefore I think I'm so keen to provide this mentorship program. Um, what would you recommend to young women to find mentors? Do you know mentor networks to recommend? And what did you do? How did you find your mentors?
So I don't know of any places outside of wisdom that are sort of
Hmm.
formalized in terms of forming them. But one thing I do want to say about mentors that there's a difference, and I'm talking from a perspective with college students of they have advisors, academic advisors, it can be staff advisors,
Hmm.
professional advisors. They are very helpful in setting the schedule, helping give guidance in careers. But to me, an advisor is different than a mentor. An advisor can also be a mentor, but there can be a subtle difference that for me, a mentor is someone that you identify. You pick, you choose. It is someone that you have found that you
Yeah.
have clicked with. This is someone that you
Yes.
trust. They trust you. You feel you can confide in them of not just about your professional goals, but things going on in life, and they sort of help you because when I look back at all of my mentors, it wasn't just my academic progress. It was how are things at home? How are things like this? It was because
Yeah.
if things in your personal life aren't going well, unfortunately, that does bleed over into your professional life. So I
True.
think it's someone that you choose. It's someone that becomes like your, for me, they're my ride or die. I mean, my dad calls my PhD advisor, he's like, he's your science dad. And whenever I'm making big life decisions, he's always like, well, what does Rick think? Did you talk to Rick about this? And if I'm making professional decisions, Rick
That's
will be like, well, what does
awesome.
your dad think? Yeah. So it's someone that it's, and I mean, you need to work on those relationships. And it can be someone in your field. It can also be someone outside of your field. What really it is that there's a personality compatibility that you trust the person and can work with them. So I think identifying someone is, again, this is easy for me to say, oh, you just have to identify someone. That's the tricky part, but it needs to be someone self-selected because and it's not that I don't like mentorship programs where you pair them up, but I've been
Hmm.
involved in some of those in the past. And sometimes it's on paper, oh, yes, you look compatible. And then you're
Yeah.
meeting
Yeah.
with the person. It doesn't quite work. I think it's better to get people in a social situation, have people connect, have people network, and
Agreed.
see who ends up clicking and who works and having the potential mentee reach out to people. I think what I've also seen from students is I've had students just cold email me. I don't know who they are. I've had high schoolers that I've gotten involved with certain science programs and I didn't know who they were and they just emailed me. I was like, this is weird. I don't know who you are. I'm Googling where your high school is and it's out of state. But I think that takes a lot of courage to reach out and identify someone that
True.
you search someone that you think is
Yes.
someone that can help. And I think by doing that, it can also, if someone responds back to you, that could be a really good indicator of, well, this opens the door that maybe
Hmm.
this person would help and could is willing to clearly take the time for a stranger and to not be offended if you don't get a response because people are very busy and responding to someone you don't know with a big ask is tough. But I think that can be, that can be a route to finding someone. But it is, I cannot stress it enough, and I think wisdom does as well. It's all about networking. It is all about who you know on a personal level if you're trying to get something done, in a
Yes.
professional level,
Yes.
making those connections. And I think being kind to people is something we don't spend enough time on to take those few seconds to just say hi to a stranger. You never know where that's going to go. And I've had instances in my life where I've just helped someone in a computer lab, not knowing who they were, helping them. They were working on a document, didn't think anything of it. And then I later find out that they're a board member on this board that I'm trying to get money from for equipment. And I had no idea. I didn't know who they were. But I think that sometimes that karma comes around of it doesn't take a lot to smile and just say, hi, good morning to someone because you never know where that's going to go. And it's not, you're not doing it in the hopes of getting something in return, but in being a good person and being kind to others.
I like that a lot personally because I totally believe in what you just said. And 100%. We should be more socially adapt, and it looks like as if these things decline right now a little bit, probably also because of social media. Even if they are called social, they are very often the opposite in a certain way. And therefore, what you just said, everybody of the listeners should really take to heart and do this. And also what you said, reach out to people that you might be afraid of that they might not reply. Do it still and be courageous about this, because you cannot lose anything. What's the worst that could happen? It's really that they don't reply. But I really like this approach. Very, very valuable insight. Very, very good. And Brenna, when we are thinking about moving into industry where wisdom finally thought there is a bottleneck that we can address, when you were talking about the career services, do they know enough how business life is in industry like? Is there a need to educate, or is that well covered, to take away the fear which I had when I moved into industry? How is that today?
I think I think that is always something we need because they're in an academic system. So a lot of us, not all faculty, but a lot of us went through grad school. Maybe you did a postdoc, maybe you had a little research experience, and then you sort of tracked on this whole, we're going to have this academic progression. And many of us didn't have any experience outside of academia.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
always looking for
good.
other options for students to see because not everyone wants to get a PhD or go to grad school or be in academia. And I don't blame them. It's definitely changed and gotten tougher. But I think that career services does a good job, but I think it can always be supplemented. I think
Okay.
anytime you can bring another opinion or perspective or bring in new contacts is always something that students should seek out and that institutions of higher ed should also seek to partner with.
Good. Thank you very much, Brenna. And when you are thinking ahead for into the next decade, so 10 years from now, what do you think the landscape in the STEM field would look like in general and perhaps also for careers? And I know that's a tough question to reply to, but might be inspiring.
So I'm a biologist, and I bring this up in my classes all the time because I look back on just the last, 20 years or so and see all of the technological advances of, right now we're living in the rise of AI, but I look at whole genome sequencing. I look at gene editing using CRISPR-Cas9, sequencing genomes. I mean, the sequencers are tabletop. I have a friend that does this. He carries it on a plane. I mean, that blows my mind that you can bring
Yes.
this powerful machine like that. And I think leading to having all of this genome information and it's already being used of personalized medicine, of based on your genetics, what is the best approach to treat, pick the disorder out there. You're starting to see that with cancer right now. So I have no idea. I can't imagine in 10 years
Yeah.
what it's going to be like. Because I think if you can imagine it's not off the table. We have no idea. I just think that as we navigate this, and I think we're seeing this with AI right now, that we're taking and having clear regulation to have ethical and responsible approaches to wherever we end up in the future. But in 10 years, who knows? I mean, 5 years, a lot could change.
Yes, 100% agreed. It was a great answer. And specifically what you said about if you can imagine it, it might be done somewhere, sometime
Yeah.
soon. And what you were mentioning about the sequencer, also I recall the first experiments when DNA was started to be sequenced, and it was a lengthy process just to get 10 base pairs correct. And now it is boom. I
Mhm.
get it. And that was an exponential development. And you're right, we will see this in other fields as well, whether it's CRISPR or other things. 100% agreed. And I think that is also so inspiring that both of us are so passionate about science, because this is endless opportunities, isn't it? And if
Mhm.
you have an idea and you can prove it and or disprove it, it's as important, I think. That's such an exciting line of work, and we want others to take part in this as well. And I'm very glad that you are here and share your story. And it was amazing, to our listeners. And yeah, I'm very glad to have you here in our series of the STEM stories of wisdom. I think that was very enlightening. to the listeners, they can reach out to us under the website, which is www.womenin.science. So this ending of the domain is very important, but you also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, Brenna, is there an opportunity to do so, and how?
Absolutely. Email is the best way to do it. So first and last name, Brenna Traver at psu.edu.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brenna. It was a pleasure talking to you and hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I appreciate it.